Hello class, welcome to Human Anatomy, Introduction to the Human Body, Chapter 1. This is a free textbook from Open Stax and Rice University. So let's get started. Here's a little icebreaker. So if you have a sheet of paper or something to scratch piece of paper, you can write, how many bones do you think are in the human body? You can maybe write the answer in the little chat. How many muscles in the human body? Smallest cell in the body? What do you think the smallest cell in the body is? What do you think the largest cell in the body is? The longest bone? The smallest bone? Here's an interesting question. What organs can you live without? Can you live without your kidneys? Can you live without your liver? Can you live without your stomach? Can you live without lungs? Probably need a heart. Probably need a brain. Right? But there are a lot of organs that you can live without. So hopefully during the semester we'll be able to kind of look at all these answers. You should be able to answer this by the end of, let's see, most of this by the midterm. The organs maybe by the final. So keep an eye on this. These questions may pop up on a quiz here and there, but most of you looking at the chat, looks like you got most of them right, but we'll go over these. Alright, so the scope of human anatomy. Anatomy is the study of the structural basis of body function. Physiology is the study of the functional relevance of a structure. Why do we have that structure? And then functional morphology is functional reasons behind the structure. Okay? So make sure you know the difference between anatomy and physiology. Alright, blood pressure. You've all had your blood pressure taken before, and usually you go to the doctor's office, and what I find funny is usually a lot of times they'll just be like, okay, let me take your blood pressure, and you're already nervous as it is, so they hurry up and do it. They sometimes take it over your sleeve. You know, the AMA did a study that if you take it over the sleeve, it can be 5 to 10 milligrams of mercury incorrect. If you have to go to the bathroom, that can throw off your blood pressure another 10 milligrams of mercury. If you're nervous, or we call that white coat syndrome, that can throw it off 10 to 20 milligrams of mercury. So that's why they usually, if you have high blood pressure, they're not going to base it on just one time. They're going to tell you, okay, let's monitor it for a while. Last thing you want to do is prescribe medication just from one reading, and no one will do that, but you want to make sure that there's a lot of errors that can occur. Proficiency in anatomy and physiology is fundamental to any career in the health profession. Alright, anatomical sciences, gross anatomy, surface anatomy, radiological anatomy, systemic anatomy, regional anatomy, and then histology. Make sure you know the differences between all these. What is gross anatomy, what is surface anatomy, radiological anatomy, systemic anatomy, and regional anatomy. Histopathology is microscopic analysis of diseased tissue. Cytology is the structure and function of individual cells. Okay. So gross and microscopic anatomy. Here's gross anatomy. Gross anatomy considers large structures such as the brain. Microscopic anatomy can deal with same structures, though at a different scale. This is a micrograph of nerve cells from the brain. So gross anatomy, microscopic anatomy. Now, what are the levels of human structure? So we're all made up of little atoms. Okay, that's the chemical level. So atoms, then a whole bunch of atoms make up molecules, a whole bunch of molecules make up organelles, a whole bunch of organelles make up cells, which is the smallest living unit, a whole bunch of cells make up tissues, a whole bunch of tissues make up organs, a whole bunch of organs make an organ system, and then all those organ systems make the beautiful creature that you are today. So what we'll do is from chapter 1 to chapter 2 to chapter 3, we'll break it down and go from here to here to here to here, and then focus on the different organ systems. We're not going to focus so much on atoms and molecules because that's chemistry. We'll pick up right at the cellular level. All right, so once we get to the organ systems, there's a bunch of organ systems, and we're going to cover pretty much all of it in this class. Integumentary system, that's the hair, skin, and nails. The skeletal system, cartilage, bones, and joints. The muscular system, all the skeletal muscles, tendons, ligaments. The nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves. The endocrine system. Now, the endocrine system is interesting because a lot of people don't know too much about it, but it plays a vital role in our survival. And the endocrine system, you'll probably see it in healthcare a lot. Diabetes. Most people with diabetes will go see an endocrinologist. So making sure you know what system is involved with what disease is important. So you got the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the pancreas, which is involved in diabetes, glucagon, insulin, the adrenal glands, testes, and ovaries are all part of the endocrine system. Now, the testes and ovaries are also part of the reproductive system, but they also play a key role in the endocrine system, and we'll talk about that. Cardiovascular system, of course, the heart and the blood vessels, arteries versus veins. We'll talk a lot about that. You got the lymphatic system. Now, another system that's often neglected, but the lymphatic system is huge. It returns fluid to the blood, so a lot of swelling can occur if your lymphatic system isn't working. The respiratory system, you probably heard a lot about the respiratory system in the news due to COVID-19, and we'll really spend some time on the respiratory system and look at x-rays, and I'll show you what to look for in x-rays. The digestive system, of course. Who hasn't had a GI disturbance after eating Del Taco or Taco Bell? So you know the GI system is working. So here's the stomach, the liver, the gallbladder, large intestine, small intestine. Here's the urinary system. Go and pee. You should be going pee. We'll talk about what's normal, what color. We got the male reproductive system, and then we got the female reproductive system. Again, so the integumentary system forms the external body covering and protects deeper tissues from injury. It synthesizes vitamin D and houses cutaneous pain and pressure receptors, sweat, and oil glands. So we'll definitely talk about that. Vitamin D, how important vitamin D is. The skeletal system, the bones, protects and supports body organs and provides a framework. The muscles used to cause movement. Blood cells are formed within the bones, and bones store minerals. Of course, the muscular system allows manipulation of the environment, locomotion, facial expression, maintains posture, and produces heat. We'll talk a lot about muscles. This is my specialty. This is what I treat. So I can tell you everything there is to know about the muscular system. Here's the brain. As the fast-acting control system of the body responds to internal and external changes by activating appropriate muscles and glands. So the brain is very important, of course, the spinal cord and nerves. Marathon runners. Runners demonstrate two characteristics of living humans: responsiveness and movement. Anatomic structures and physiological processes allow runners to coordinate the action of muscle groups and sweat in response to rising internal body temperature. So you don't realize, but just running itself, you'll use the muscular system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, endocrine system, integumentary system, you name it. Every system is working while you're running. And we'll talk about a little bit of physiology of it, but it's amazing all the activities that you do and all the organ systems that are involved doing a simple act. All right, the endocrine system. Glands secrete hormones that regulate processes such as growth, reproduction, nutrient use, metabolism by body cells. We'll talk about metabolism, losing weight, excess weight, diabetes, you name it. Well, hopefully I can cover some of it. Our metabolism is anabolic reactions are building reactions, and they consume energy. Catabolic reactions break materials down and release energy. Metabolism includes both anabolic and catabolic reactions. So when you're young, when you're healthy, your metabolism is great. You get catabolism and you get anabolism. It's just a constant flow. As you get older, your metabolism slows down, your catabolism slows down, your anabolism may increase because it requires energy. So it just depends on the situation. Sometimes hereditary, sometimes certain autoimmune diseases can affect your metabolism. We'll talk about weight gain and weight loss later on when we do the endocrine system. Probably the most important system, cardiovascular system. If you don't have a cardiovascular system, then you probably won't be alive, right? So you need a heart and blood vessels for sure. But we'll talk about the difference between the veins, the arteries, all that good stuff. Blood vessels transport blood, which carries oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, and waste, and the heart pumps the blood. Extreme heat. Humans adapt to some degree to repeated exposure to high temperatures, right? So if it's really hot, you probably need to find some way, or the body needs to find some way to release that excess heat. And we do it by sweating. Certain animals actually don't sweat. So if you had a cheetah chasing you, right? Imagine that. If it doesn't kill you within the first 100 feet, you could actually outrun a cheetah. And the reason is that humans, you release heat by sweating. Cheetahs do not. They have to stop, pant, release some heat, and then go back at it again. So that's why you could actually outrun a cat, again, if they don't kill you within the first 100 feet or so. But long distance wise, humans can definitely outrun a cheetah. The lymphatic system, red bone marrow, the thymus, lymphatic vessels, thoracic duct, the spleen, very important, and then the lymph nodules. And we'll talk about that in immune response as well. Picks up fluid leak from blood vessels and returns it to the blood, disposes of debris in the lymphatic system, houses white blood cells, lymphocytes involved in immunity. The immune response mounts the attack against foreign substances within the body. So vaccines, we'll talk about vaccines, we'll talk about immunity, we'll talk about T cells, B cells, all that good stuff. Respiratory system, nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, the lung, the bronchi. Got the respiratory system, keeps blood constantly supplied with oxygen, removes carbon dioxide, and the gaseous exchanges occur through the walls of the air sacs of the lungs. The good old digestive system. Love a good In-N-Out burger. Well, imagine eating an In-N-Out burger from here. It's got to go all the way down to the esophagus, go through into your stomach. The liver's got to release certain enzymes to break it down. Small intestines, it's got to break it down some more. That's where most nutrient absorption takes place. Then by the time it reaches the large intestines, it's mostly fecal matter. Then it goes into the sigmoid colon, rectum, anal canal, and then the toilet, right? But that can take, depending on the individual, it could take a day, 2 days, 3 days, depends, right? Some of you have a very motile digestive system. Some of you have a very slow digestive system. If you ask a GI doc, they'll say, oh, they see anywhere from someone pooping once a day to once a week, and they find that normal. I don't know about once a week. That's a little extreme, but you don't have to go every day. You can go every other day, and that's all perfectly normal. It just depends on what you eat and what your body can handle. Harsh conditions. Climbers on Mount Everest must accommodate to extreme cold, low oxygen levels, and low barometric pressure in an environment hostile to human life. Humans are resilient. Yeah, we can withstand extreme heat, extreme cold. We learn to adapt to the environment. You remember the survival of the fittest? Well, humans are definitely a great example of survival of the fittest. Okay, and the beauty is that the human body can adapt to this because it has many, many systems that work together for this to occur. Okay, and we'll break down each and every single system and show you what the importance is and what organs you need to know. And now you've got the urinary system. Speaking of the urinary system, if you've got to go pee, go ahead and go pee. Don't ever hold your pee. Here's the urinary system. Eliminates nitrogenous waste from the body, regulates water, electrolyte, acid-base balance of the blood. Now you have 2 kidneys. You could actually live with 1 kidney and then really half of another one. So really you only need half of 1 kidney to survive. If you were to donate 1 kidney, the other kidney will actually increase by 40% to do the job of this kidney. So We'll talk about more detail later. Now, your body has negative feedback loops and positive feedback loops. So let's say you have a stimulus, then you have a sensor, you have a control, and then you have an effector. That's a negative feedback loop. So let's give an example here. Body temperature regulation. Let's say your body temperature exceeds 37 degrees. So you probably are doing temperature checks right now for COVID-19. The reason that most humans have a fever is it raises the fever to help ward off the bacteria or the viral infection. Well, the nerve cells in the skin and the brain says, "Ooh, you're a little hot." So what's the control? The temperature regulatory center in the brain, and we'll break this down a little bit. Well, then it says, well, you know what? You're too hot. I'm going to sweat. I got to cool you down a little bit. So sweat glands throughout the body. So that body temperature regulation is an example of a negative feedback loop. Okay? In a negative feedback loop, a stimulus, which is the body temperature exceeds 37 degrees from a set point, is resisted through a physiological process that returns the body to homeostasis. A negative feedback loop has 4 basic parts, and the body temperature is regulated by a negative feedback. Okay. The male reproductive system, prostate, digestive, scrotum, overall function is production of offspring. So remember, the main purpose of the reproductive system is to produce offspring. Now, there's only a few species, if you take biology or if you take in zoology, that actually reproduce for fun. Not really fun, but have sex for fun. Reproduction is actually a process that is required to maintain your offspring. So the humans, the bovino chimps, and dolphins are really only species that have sex for fun. Every other species is thinking reproduction, reproduction, offspring, and then survival of their species. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth later. Testes produce sperm and male sex hormone, and the male ducts and glands aid in delivery of sperm to the female reproductive tract. At this age, you're probably thinking, okay, how do I not deliver sperm to the female reproductive tract? But really, when you're ready to have a child, this is what you need. You need to find how the smallest cell in the body can find one of the largest cells in the body. So the smallest cell in the body is sperm, and one of the largest cells is the female egg. You can actually see the female egg with the human eye, naked eye there, okay, without the use of microscopes. So ovaries, and it's about 100 micrometers. Ovaries produce eggs and female sex hormones. The remaining female structures serve as sites for fertilization and development of the fetus. Mammary glands of female breasts produce milk to nourish the newborn. And then you got the female reproductive tract. Overall function is to produce offspring. Testes produce sperm and the male sex hormone, male ducts, and then delivery of sperm and female reproductive tract. So again, here's an example of the positive feedback loop. Okay, so normal childbirth is driven by a positive feedback. Remember, body temperature regulation is negative feedback, but we have a positive feedback loop. Positive feedback loop results in a change in the body status rather than a return to homeostasis. So we got to change. So the head of the baby pushes against the cervix. Nerve impulses from the cervix transmitted to the brain. The brain stimulates pituitary gland to secrete oxytocin. Oxytocin carried in the bloodstream to the uterus, and oxytocin stimulates uterine contractions and pushes the baby towards the cervix. Boom. So this is the positive feedback loop. Now you're always thinking, hey, Patel, does spelling count? Of course. Because look at oxytocin. If you spell it wrong, you can easily spell OxyContin. And there's a big difference between oxytocin and OxyContin. So one is for pain and one is for childbirth. So again, to emphasize, we want to make sure spelling counts, and we're careful with that. Okay, so make sure you check your spelling. Do humans vary? Of course humans vary. Varies in human structure. Not all people have normal position of the organs. 70% are normal. You have a 30% variability. That's a lot. Some people can have 1 kidney, 2 spleens. So the terminology situs solidus means a normal arrangement. Most of you are situs solidus, normal. Some of you might be situs inversus, which is reverse position of the organs. Or you might be situs perversus, where one organ is atypically positioned. So here's normal, right? Liver's on the right side, stomach's on the left, the lung, the heart is slightly tilted to the left. But if you're situs inversus, well, the heart can be slightly to the right side. The liver's on the left, the stomach's on the right. So completely flipped. And 70% are normal, 30% of you is situs inversus. You would think that's a lot of people, right? But you never want to, when you look at statistics, you don't never want to say, oh man, 30% in our class have situs inversus. That's not necessarily true. You can go in the whole United States and maybe nobody has situs inversus, but then there's a whole bunch in the outer banks of India, right? So, it just depends. But they're just saying that 30% of the population has situs inversus.